Hello, and welcome to the Bechdel Theatre Podcast, the podcast where we talk about gender and representation on stage. I'm Pippa.
And I'm Beth.
And we're your hosts.
This is the second of our special Edinburgh Fringe episodes where we are interviewing artists up here in the lovely town of Edinburgh.
Whoop whoop. So this week we interview Alissa Anne Jeun Yi, the performer and creator of the show Love Songs, and we talk to her about a range of things from entering the arts from a non-theatre background. Alissa studied law. About her experiences with the Soho Writers Lab and the Edinburgh Lab, about the topics that her show explores, which ranges from the fetishization of East Asian identity, or as I'm liking to call, fetishization. Sorry, I don't know how many words I tried to fit Asian into. And also about dealing with sensitive or potentially triggering topics in Edinburgh Fringe shows and how she self-cares, how she looks after her audience, all of that really interesting stuff. So we will hand it over to ourselves and Alissa with the lovely interview we did with her. But as always, stick around to the end where we'll give you some shows to recommend.
Take it away, Alissa.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Bechdel Theatre Podcast, live, pre-recorded but live from the Edinburgh Fringe. Today, Beth and I are joined by Alissa Cooper, aka Alissa Anne Jeun Yi, to talk about Alissa's solo show, Love Songs, which is on at Underbelly Cowgate. Hi, Alissa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
So we wanted to ask you a little bit about how you created your show. We don't want to spoil it too much for the listeners because we're assuming that they haven't yet seen the show and they're going to be like desperate to come and see it by the time they've heard you talk about it. But one of the things that you do say at the very beginning of the show, so it's not a spoiler, is that you started off by studying law rather than drama or theatre or performance-related things, and that's where the performance begins, is where you're at uni studying law. How did you make that transition from between studying that subject to ending up making a show?
Yes, it's a very weird one, and actually when I first started writing the show, the fact that I had studied law wasn't a big part of it, but in writing it, and I know you've obviously seen the show, that part of me law is a big part of who I am and who I was as a person, so then it made sense to include it. So I graduated 2 years ago, and I went to a top law university, and I always thought that I wanted to do something human rights related. So I was just saying to Pippa, women's rights, environmental rights, religious rights. I did a lot of international criminal law and philosophy around that. So I knew that I wanted to make a difference in the world, but my skill sets are not necessarily, I'm not a very accurate person. And I think the idea of being in charge with someone's life and not like that pressure made me think that maybe there were other ways I could make a difference.
I love it. So. We've got someone here with a certified law degree who's saying the arts can help make a difference. Normally we have to like tell people and be like, it can make a difference. No. We've got you here telling.
Well, I think because with something like that, there are very set rules. It's like black and white and yes and no for a lot of the law, and that's what I really struggled with in my own experiences. That's why I never pursued anything legal with certain situations I was in, which also is in the show, but because sometimes like life is a grey area. You can't answer all life's questions, like solve everything by just a yes or a no, which I felt like law's very strict and in a box, and rules do work for certain problems, but sometimes we need to have discussions and debates and like stimulate them, and that is where art is so important.
And you kind of get to use, so the show is autobiographical, and you really invite us in and place yourself within it, which I guess, you know, if you went down a kind of traditional law path, you wouldn't be able to kind of engage personally with so many people so much. And Love Songs is, the play shows your kind of romantic idealization of romance and relationships, and you go back and you read poetry that you wrote about crushes that you had when you were younger. So where did you start on your journey? Did you start off with this idea that you wanted to make a piece about your kind of history with love, or where did it kind of come in?
That's a really good question, and honestly, I don't even know where it started, because it has all sort of snowballed. You know, when something snowballs, you're like, how did I end up here? Yeah. Like, I've never performed for more than one night in my life. I've only been performing my poetry for a year. So I've never been on stage really before, and suddenly I'm in Underbelly doing this. So it is a time to take stock and think about how I ended up there.
It's amazing.
Like, I went to Fringe 3 years ago. That was my first Fringe, and I saw some amazing one-woman shows, and at this point I knew that I didn't like my degree and I was getting more involved with drama society, but very traditional theatre, and I saw shows like Every Brilliant Thing, that classic, and Katie Bonner's All the Things I Lied About, and Work Like Theatre, Labels, and most of them made me cry. And really made me think about, just changed my mind as to what theatre was and could do. So at that point I knew I had just started performing these poems at little scratch nights, and they're quite funny poems, and I thought, oh well, maybe I could weave them together and make a little funny stand-up show. Then seeing these one-woman shows, and seeing Katie's show especially, where at the end, I don't know if you know about it, All the Things I Lied About.
I've heard a lot of really great things about it, but I've never seen it.
I can give you the script. I will give you the script. I read the script again recently, and again I cried. But it's all about her experience, well, her dad gaslighting her mum, and how that has affected her relationship with him and her relationships with other people. And it's such a touching story, but the form is really innovative. And at the end, she does a bucket collection for a women's rights charity, which is what I do at the end of Love Songs. And that really resonated with me at the time, because although I hadn't admitted, well, I will say the show is about sexual assault, because I don't think that's too much of a spoiler. It says on the flyer, like, trigger warnings. It's important to do that. But I hadn't really processed what had happened to me. And I know gaslighting is different from sexual assault, but there's some layer of manipulation there, like similarity of manipulation, and I identified to that part of her show quite strongly. And so it was at that point 3 years ago I began to think, well, actually maybe there's a story I can tell with these poems which is a bit more serious and has more depth to it than just reading them out and being like, oh, haha, that's funny.
The show does chart the poetry that you've obviously, even though you've only been performing it for a year, you've obviously been writing poetry for a longer time, right? How does it feel reading out the words of your younger self?
Funny. I don't know if it's funny for other people, but I think it's absolutely hilarious, because, and there are more that aren't in the show, but I wrote poems about the fact that I was predicted 5 A stars at A level, and I got 3 A stars, 1 A and 1 B in history, and I wrote a very serious poem about me crying in the shower because I had failed, but it wasn't meant to be funny, and that's why it's so funny. So yeah, I just think it's hilarious when I look back at all these things, and I think that's nice. A lot of the show is actually things that I'm embarrassed about, but we've all been there. I mean, I get annoyed when some girls don't seem to have had that awkward stage in there.
They did. Everyone... They're just lying.
They just haven't admitted it to an audience.
So that really just reminds me of what Beth has been doing while she's up here, because there's this night that exists in London but is also up here at the Fringe called Dear Diary, and it's when people are invited to bring along their diaries from when they were younger and read entries of them out. And so Beth did her first one the other night, and she's doing it again this week, and it was so funny because the diary entries of all the people who read them out are so sincere, but through hindsight and it being read in front of to an audience, it is hilarious.
It's like instant comedy.
Yeah.
Just from reading like the voice of a 14-year-old, it's so hilarious.
Was yours a 14?
It was a 14-year-old, and I think it's the same age.
Brilliant.
As the person who runs the night is called Helen Black, and she reads her diary at the like as the headline of the night, and her diary is from about the same age 14, and it's just hilarious. Just the really serious issues in our lives were so sweet. Yeah, so it did remind me of when you were reading your little teenage poems. I was like, oh no, that's going to be me when I do the Dear Diary night when we watch love songs. So yeah.
It's very nostalgic, isn't it? And I think it's lovely because you're not hiding anything, like that. It's very truthful. Those are things you actually have written. To see how you've grown and as a person since then, I think is amazing. I that's what I like about those sorts of things.
It was a very clever thing you did in your show with the you kind of bookend the show with a similar type of poem or similar lines, but you've kind of changed as a character by the time the hour is finished.
I'm glad you noticed that was what it was doing.
Yeah, of course.
There's another show at Fringe. So I was on the Soho Theatre Edinburgh Lab, as you know. There's another show by Fran Boosh. You must have heard of her. She was at Vault Festival. Her show's called Ad Libido, and it's at Pleasance.
Yes.
And she similarly reads out diary entries about like her first crushes, if that's
great.
Yeah, her show is all about female sexual dysfunction, but again, like love songs, it's quite a serious topic, but told through a lot of glitter and sparkles and sequins and just
that's how I
good
consume
vibes.
Everything.
Yeah.
I will only consume serious topics if there's like pink and sequins and other forms of poetry and song and stuff like that. You've just mentioned the Soho Edinburgh Lab, and there was also a writer's lab, which you're a part of as well. Could you tell us a bit about that and how you got onto it? Was it your first time doing something like that? How have they helped you?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it links back to what you were saying about how come I did law and I've ended up here. So I applied for it. I've just graduated from it, so I applied for it last summer around this time.
So was it a year long?
So it starts at February. Don't quote me on that, but that was roughly the time. I did an application for that, and I'd got some writing experience behind me. So, but this was the first writing course I've ever done, which was exciting because I was entertaining the idea of maybe I do an MA, but after that law degree, I just didn't want to go back to uni. And I also didn't think that it would be the most useful thing because I was realising I wanted to write things that were a bit, I don't want to use the word experimental, but you know what I mean. It's not a traditional script. So that's why I thought the Soho Theatre would be a really good option. And actually, Jules from Soho Theatre, she told me that a lot of people use it as kind of an alternative to doing a degree because they also offer bursaries, which was amazing. So it's not only is it like significantly cheaper than doing an MA, you still have structure like you would in a degree, which some people need. I find that very useful. You get to borrow 5 plays a month. So I was consuming a lot of theatre. You get free tickets to shows or £5 ticket to shows. So I learned a lot through doing that, and I also was able to develop my script through them and get feedback. I thoroughly recommend it.
So did you apply for the course with an idea? Was the idea you had them very different to now, or?
I didn't apply with love songs.
Yeah.
But yes, so I applied with another one about my mum, and in fact that was on the Tristan Bates, I think it was, and she came to see it, and it's about a mother and daughter and a British-Chinese relationship between them. It was called Blood, but now I'm developing it with another theatre. It's called How to Cook Chinese Food in 5 Easy Steps, and the idea is all about, stir fry and cooking and how that bonds like female friendships together. And do I remember you saying, are you vegan? Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I struggle with when I go home to my mum, because my mum, she she's not like a huge cook, but she would cook like Chinese meals for us when we were younger. But now that I'm vegan, she's like, there's just like nothing that we can share. That like I go home and she's got quite a strict kind of diet, and I just find that there's so much food that I like miss out on that I can't eat anymore for being vegan. I just need to learn how to do it. But
it's dim sum, or when you walk past the Chinese bakeries in Chinatown on the way to Soho Theatre. Mm-hmm. That is what gets me. Nothing else gets me, just that.
Yeah.
Well, my family are actually, some of them in San Francisco are Tao Buddhist, and also lactose intolerant because East Asian. So actually, and my mum's veggie, so actually I'm very, very lucky. But I do get what you mean. It like, they're like, you don't eat... But you eat fish though, right? Fish is not a meat.
It's weird how people think that, don't they?
Then you've got the gluten-free thing on top of it.
I'm also gluten-free as well. I mean, I'm supposed to be gluten-free, but it's kind of like I'm very flexy with it because I can't be bothered to give
We've been having a lot of rice in Edinburgh.
We have been doing a lot of stir-fry, actually.
Stir-fry and rice every day.
It's so easy to
go wrong.
Yeah.
And cheap, healthy.
Exactly.
Be vegan, guys.
Shout out to the Chinese shop on South Clark Street.
Oh my god, that supermarket. That's where we got our tofu.
Starlight supermarket with 75p soy sauce.
Yeah. 75p?
Yeah.
Oh, I should have gone there. I went to Sainsbury's.
Oh no!
Can you believe?
It is the other side of town from here, but I recommend.
I hope my mum doesn't listen to this. She'll be so disappointed in me. No, so just to answer your question and bring it back, I applied with this idea for a play that I had. But the Soho Theatre were coming to see work in progress versions of Love Songs at Camden People's Theatre, it performed. And Jules, bless her, was so, kept on being like, but why don't you, giving me nudges like, but why don't you develop this script? And I was so adamant. I was like, no, I feel like it's the best script it could be. It wasn't. Like, now I've done 42 drafts since working on it with them. But yeah, at the time I was like, no, I want to do this Chinese one instead.
Wow, yeah.
So she sort of nudged me. And then I developed Love Songs through the Soho Writers Lab instead.
Cool. And then, so what does the Edinburgh Lab do that the Writers Lab doesn't do? Does it kind of like really just kind of help you set up your show for Edinburgh?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Edinburgh Lab is not just for playwrights. It can be for producers or comedians. A lot of people, who do Fringe, produce and perform and write their own work. But anyone can apply for it. I know like a lot of playwrights who are also producing their work but aren't performing in their work have applied for it. A lot of character comedians, a huge variety of people. And it's more skills and practical skills based. So they do workshops on how to get press into your show, on marketing your show, finding a good image and brand, which is incredibly useful for Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. So it's just quite a supportive environment as well to meet lots of people who are in the same boat. Mm-hmm. And this year I made a little flyer that promoted all our shows together, and we'll all be using that flyer to sort of give us some legitimacy as well that we've been supported by the Soho Theatre. So kind of that sort of thing, like press, marketing skills that you will need, knowledge, tech. Lee, who runs the lab, he helped me with my QLab file so much.
Wow.
So it's kind of different for everyone, actually, whereas the Writers Lab's very structured and like everyone develops a script. People come with different shows and ideas to the Edinburgh Lab, and they're just supported in, getting the most out of it and being prepared to promote it in Edinburgh. Just like knowledge beforehand.
Did they help you with any of the access stuff? Because we came to a relaxed performance where you had this really great sheet that kind of detailed things for the show that people might want to know about, and I wondered kind of where did you get that idea and how did you develop that style of performance, or that, knowing to do that?
Actually, Underbelly, because that's the venue I'm with, sent us an email and said to everybody, if you want to do relaxed performances, we can give you advice, and we recommend. Well, they didn't say that they recommended, but when people phrase it like that's something that you should do, and that really excited me because it's very important that my work is accessible to everybody. Unfortunately, the venue isn't wheelchair accessible, but they do say that with advance notice, they can help anyone who has those access issues. Me and my producer Tanya have never done an accessible performance before, so didn't know what it would entail. We talked to Kaya from Cabin and People's Theatre, who gave us some advice and kind of looked at what other people had been doing. The show itself hasn't got that many things. I guess it was all sort of being about logical. Like, the first step is that people can come and leave whenever they like. Obviously, audience interaction might be a problem for some people, so asking, which we do anyway, because the whole point is that it's a safe environment, so making sure people feel comfortable and that they know that they're not going to be picked on, because even if someone's not picked on, they'll be feeling throughout the whole show, oh no, is she going to choose me? So if we make it clear these people have volunteered and they'll be in the show and the rest of you guys are safe, then that just makes everyone relax a bit more. The idea for the little typed up document that you saw is that people can choose whether or not they have a summary of all the plot points, and we were given some advice that you should use Comic Sans as a good font to use, and also just make it quite a large font, and we put little because we saw it on someone else's relaxed performance form, but we put little emojis in. So there was a speech bubble for if there's audience interaction, there's an angry face for like moments that I will get angry and or highly emotional, and there's, I can't remember, a speakerphone for if there's a loud noise, because there's a party popper in the show. So just putting them so people can see very quickly, rather than having just like a bunch of text, trying to make it more readable that way, so that people know. Those are the three things that I think people would be most scared about, like any loud noises, any high emotional moments, and then just having the noise level should be lower.
It felt very safe as an audience member coming in and knowing that you had trigger warnings on your flyers and things, and thinking, oh, this might be a bit intense, but then the way you welcomed everyone in and the way you asked people if they wanted to be in the show or not, and saying you can leave at any point, and the fact that you'd taken so much care to go to printing the sheet and everything made me feel like, okay, we're in safe hands here. Which sometimes I feel like there are shows that will be like, oh, trigger warning, but then not do anything more than that to actually like let the audience know what they can do if they feel like they're not able to cope or they want to take a moment out. And you kind of went that extra step, which I think felt like it was appreciated by all the people in the room. So
I think because the whole point in doing this show, well, not the whole point, but one of the big things for me is that as someone who has experienced sexual assault, I want to put a narrative out there that other people can identify with, because a lot of the narratives that I see are not very healing or helpful or empowering. And so it was important to me that people do feel safe, because I don't want to, like, if I'm not going to see any shows this Fringe that have those issues involved, because you don't know, like you say with the trigger warnings, that sometimes that is not enough because people have very specific triggers. So I thought it was very important that if those are audiences I'm trying to reach, because I do think there are positive messages in the show which speak to people who have experienced sexual assault, it was important that I made that clear, that it wasn't an environment where I was looking to use that narrative to shock or like make people unstable. I was using that narrative in a different way, hence like the breathing exercises at the end as well, to relieve any tension, because I know I wouldn't want to be in that position as someone who's experienced that, sitting there and feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't cope. So maybe that's why there's that element of going the extra mile, because from personal experience I know what it's like to not enjoy a show.
The breathing exercise was very effective. In the intense environment of Edinburgh Fringe Festival, to sit in a room full of people and just breathe in and out together was really...
Oh, it's lovely.
Yeah.
Maybe
nice.
That'll be the next show, just like meditation.
Yeah, oh, I'd love that. Yeah. And kind of following on from that, in terms of how you look after your audience and the subjects that your play deals with, do you have any kind of ways that you're kind of looking after yourself as a performer, especially in this kind of environment with the kind of hectic Fringe festival lifestyle that it is for the crazy month? Do you have any ways that you kind of self-care or look after yourself, or especially like after the show maybe?
So, like you say, after the show, before, there's a lot of structure that goes into the day, which I think makes things easier. So I found a lovely place for yoga in the meadows. They're called Meadowlark Yoga, and they do a 30-day pass. So instead of buying a membership, which normally you have to pay for 2 months, which is so expensive if you're only going to be here 1 month, I can do 1 class a day. So I'll do that in the morning, and then it's kind of a warm-up as well. Luckily my show's at 2, so it's not too late in the day. I have to leave here around 2, so once I've done yoga and had lunch and just avoided social media as much as possible because I want a clear head before the show, then after the show I'll do some work, and that will sort of distract me a bit and make me feel a bit more grounded as well, because I'm doing something productive and practical. I think those are the coping mechanisms I've got in place, but there's always room for others. I feel like I've isolated myself a bit too much. I just wanted to get into the swing of things, but I was recommended not to go see that many shows, which is so hard to do because I love shows. Like, that's why we're here, because we love supporting other artists and we love theatre and comedy, but that is also what's keeping my head a bit clear, because I have this flat away from everything and not been on the Royal Mile, have been doing minimal flyering, which does affect numbers in the show, but it's more important just to avoid all this, because the last thing I want is to make things competitive and to be comparing myself to others. Like, I want to support other people's work, but I know if I go see too many shows, I'll be sitting in the show thinking, oh, but you could have done this, or just thinking about my show or comparing myself to them, when that's not what Fringe is about. Fringe is about a variety of awesome things on offer. So I'm sort of taking a step back in order to maintain that positive attitude towards it.
I think that sounds like a really good idea. I think I would probably need to follow a similar kind of structure if I were doing the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's because we're here like seeing shows back to back. It's such an emotional roller coaster. If you're wanting to engage fully with each piece and wanting to see a range of stuff, like we've tried to keep the balance between seeing something very, very intense and emotional and then seeing something that's a bit fun. And some days it's worked well, and we've, like, this morning was great. We saw Sparks, which was really, really emotional, and then we saw Polaris, which was really sweet and fun, and so it felt like we kind of healed ourselves afterwards. Yeah. But I feel like, yeah, if I was doing a show up here, especially a show like yours, I would be like, none of the emotional shows, maybe I'll go see a comedy show, but yeah, I think it's...
I've been to see, like, the 2 shows I've seen, actually the 3 shows I've seen so far. One was Lights Over Tesco Car Park, which, you know, is fun and lighthearted. Then it was Queens of Sheba and Hot Brown Honey, and I knew, like, I wanted to see them because they were high on my to see list, and that they would be empowering because they have similar issues to what I'm discussing. So I was just like, empowering, that's what I want. Queens of Sheba was quite sad, but in a good way. So
yeah, your show was really kind of unique as well, alongside the kind of storyline of your relationships and things like that, that for me felt completely special, because you so rarely see a show that is about a mixed race Chinese and English person, especially a woman. And in terms of representation, that was amazing for us to see a show that we hadn't seen like that before. Do you draw in any kind of like audiences that you might not have like otherwise had? Like, have you had a lot of like Chinese women coming to the show? How has it been? Have you had any other conversations with people about that specific representation?
Yes, I have, and it has surprised me, actually, really surprised me in such a good way, that I think in every single audience there has been someone or a group, because people come in groups, don't they? South and East Asian, because we're a South and East Asian theatre company. And but it's interesting when you say specifically it's not that I'm just Chinese, I'm mixed race, and that carries a whole other, I mean, it's completely different from just having one culture. Your experience as a mixed race Chinese woman is completely different, and completely different from anyone else's experience who is also mixed race. But I've had a lot of mixed race people come to the show and make particular comments about how nice it is to see themselves represented because of that mix of cultures, and not because a large part of the show as a coming of age, although it's not discussed explicitly in the script, I feel you get a feel for that, not knowing who you are or who to identify as, where looks are such a big part of the romantic relationships you form, especially when you're younger, when you're so shallow, and that aspect of where do you belong. The element of being mixed race, I think, is something that people particularly identify with.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. That reminds me as well of when I went to see Coco Brown's show.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, so we saw it in London and she's bringing it up here, so we're really excited for that. But I remember talking to her afterwards and being like, look, I'm a completely different mixture of races to you, but I just related so much to this the storyline of being mixed race. I was like, did no one talk, like, they never see this, and like I've got a completely different history to you, but there was something that I found was like I still felt so represented in that show.
It's interesting because what my assistant producer on this show is half white, half black, but when I first met her, we both have little glasses, we're both quite tiny, and I just always joke that we're the same person, and she just pointed that out the other day. She was like, we're not even the same race, and I think I made that joke in the show about my best friend that teaches me so much. She's a different mix of races, but there's just something there about being a mix of everything and that you can identify with.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's because I was the audience member picked to play your friend in the show, but I loved that relationship so much. It really stood out for me as like the kind of a real positive beacon in the show of like that female friendship. Just I wanna know this person.
Yeah.
She seems like such a great friend.
It's the classic thing, isn't it? I didn't realise. It's funny because this is a coming of age story, and my coming of age happened at university. Very late. She was a combination of friends that I met at university, because where I grew up, there were just like there was no one there who was Chinese or.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Oxford and then started like high school in Kent, so yeah, I've lived in quite suburban-y villages, like Midsummer Murdery type villages all my life. No, it is so important in any, like if you're thinking just technically about coming of age stories, there's always that best friend, isn't there, who just like empowers and pushes the other person to find themselves and be the best version of themselves. And I think that, yeah, that is so true from my experience, definitely.
Something that we always ask our podcast guests is who their feminist faves are, which is people, things, art that inspire you in some way. Obviously, because we're at the Fringe, you can recommend some shows that you might want to for our listeners. Have you got anything that at the moment you're like, oh my god, need to see this? I mean, you've already mentioned Queens of Sheba and Hot Brown Honey.
Yes, and I will add to that list. Well, of course, White by Coco Brown, the lovely, lovely Coco Brown. I definitely would go see that because, I mean, it's got a lot in common with this one, with the like mixed race storyline and the use of spoken word. But she also uses looping, which is incredible. So a lot of my friends through the Soho are doing various feminist shows that people who listen to your podcast would be interested in. So there's Lost in Thought, which is at Underbelly, which is a two-hander about like a mother and daughter, and the daughter has OCD. And there's also Weird at the Pleasance, which is also about a young girl who has OCD. So they're very different pieces, but they're both based on autobiographical experiences, and they're both written and performed by women, which is amazing. And then there's Awakening, which is written by Kirsty Osman, and she's also starring in that. That's at Underbelly Bristo Square. And similar to Love Songs, I don't want to, like, you know, give away spoilers, but it's quite a dark comedy as well, about various feminist issues. But Kirsty is just such an amazing performer. She really gives it a lightness, almost clowny in a way. It's a very colourful show. It's got a lot of personality, lots of playing different roles. It's really clever and really fun, so I'd recommend that. There's just so many things to recommend.
I know. I know we have a hard time because we have so many on our list and our radar. But those are great because we've got more.
Yeah, more recommendations. You never get enough at the Fringe.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
It's been a lovely interview. And where can people see your show?
So we're on Underbelly Cowgate at 2:40 from the 2nd to the 26th, but not the 15th. So yes, people can see it then.
So you get one day off.
Yeah, I know. Oh gosh. Yeah, my friend at Summerhall has 3 days off, and I was like, that's not fair.
Whoa.
But if people do come see the show, then do come say hi afterwards, because I'd love to hear where you heard about the show and things like that.
That's so lovely. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Alissa for that interview.
It really reminded me about taking care of yourself at Edinburgh Fringe, and I think we walked home after that and bought ourselves a big plate of vegetables.
Was that when we made the stir fry?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that was good. That was really worth it. To be honest, guys, we started off really well at the Fringe. Like, we bought loads of seeds and fruit and veg, and then recently it's just gone a bit downhill.
Burgers and chips.
Burgers and chips. I've eaten so much falafel.
But Alissa reminded us to pick up some spinach.
Yeah. We did well. We got some tofu from the Chinese supermarket.
And there's a really good greengrocer on our road.
Yeah.
So it's going well. We're okay. We're fine.
We're surviving.
And we've seen lots of amazing shows. We've seen 42 shows now.
Oh,
Can you believe it?
That's mad.
What?
Yeah.
So here is, we're just going to recommend a little few, but please do follow us on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with all of the recommendations, because we can't possibly fit them all into the podcast.
So starting off is Sparks, which was on at the Pleasance Courtyard, starring and written by Jessica Butcher, also featuring the music of Anushka Lucas. It's a two-hander between these two amazing women, and it explores grief and relationships, but with a live music score. And the two women both play the same character, but one expresses himself through music and the piano and like really beautiful song. Anushka's voice is amazing, and the other one expresses the character through speech, and she brings the audience on this amazing journey. Anyway, Sparks, go see it. It'll make you cry. It's beautiful. Really.
It's 11:30 a.m, so I did cry into my coffee
Yes.
that morning. But like, talking about potentially triggering topics with Alissa, Sparks covers things like grief, but it does so in such a kind of, in a way that leaves you feeling with a positive energy at the end.
Yeah, and it explores disability as well, and is another one that links to being a family member or related to someone who has a disability. So it's really nice seeing Fringe shows explore these kind of difficult topics that we don't see in many ways.
Next up, we really, really heavily recommend the Paynes Plough plays this year. So Paynes Plough have this amazing venue called Roundabout, which is in the round. That's why it's called a roundabout. But it's an amazing venue because there are no bad seats. You can't get a bad view in there. It's an amazingly intimate venue that can fit lots of people in, which is good because generally the shows that are on there are top quality and end up selling out. So the two that we saw back to back were Sticks and Stones and Island Town, and they were the same cast for both of them, and we could not believe that it was the same people on stage because their performances were just so spectacular.
Incredible. Like the plays were so different, and it had the same three actors, and it was just incredible. It's just two for the price of two, but it was you think that these actors are purely living and breathing these characters in the first show, and then you see them completely switch, and it's just an absolute feat to see actors do that, especially in the back-to-back. They're amazing as plays on their own, but especially seeing it in that environment, I was blown away.
It's a masterclass. I think the actor with the bright red hair, Katherine Pierce, has just won an award, which is well deserved for her acting. But they were all phenomenal.
Sticks and Stones is about a character who is, at first she comes on and you think she's like has BDE, like she comes in, she's very like top boss, big dick energy, really good at her job, and she cracks a joke in a meeting with some clients that is rather unsavory, and we never learn what the joke was, but the play kind of follows the consequences of her saying this joke and whether or not she said, you know, she's like, she thinks it's okay to kind of make that kind of comment. And it's just really interesting the way that the play explores it. It's by Vinay Patel.
The physicality of it is amazing, actually. Actually, in both the plays, that was one thing they had in common, is that they both used kind of the space of the circular roundabout space really well, and they both used kind of, I would say, like non-naturalistic moments of physicality.
Oh, it was
to
great.
kind of flag up like the like feeling, the energy, the message of the play.
The sound worked really well as well. Like, yeah, like there was all these like flashes of like movement and physical gestures, and it was so
really,
good.
really strong. In Sticks and Stones, they kept returning to the same kind of repeated physical movements that got more and more frantic and really kind of got you caught up in the sort of drama tension of the piece. Tension, that's the right word.
And it was really playful as well in comparison to Island Town, which was much more kind of serious, I guess.
Yeah, it was more of like a drama, and it was about three teenagers trying to get out of their small town, and it seemed like they were almost kind of physically penned into their environment of a small town with no jobs, where public transport's been cut, so they can't even leave to sign on to get benefits. They're just kind of stuck in this cycle. And I thought the kind of cyclical nature of their lives and their environment was really well reflected in the space of the circle of the play. It felt like they were actually trapped, and it was quite sad. And then we watched Sticks and Stones, which was like punchy.
Yeah.
So go see both of those.
Yeah, it's great when a Fringe show has the space in mind so much, because so often you can come up to the Fringe and you see a show that doesn't quite fit the space. So that was, totally amazing. Also, some cabaret that we saw, which was incredible, is a woman called Yana Alana. She's Australian, and she has a keyboardist and someone who plays the keys, and a drummer in her show, and it's called Between the Cracks. She comes on stage fully naked, but she's covered in blue body paint, so she actually looks like she's wearing like a dress or a jumpsuit or something. And she comes in with her opening song, which is about being blue, and it's amazing. It's full of puns and jokes, and the show was so uplifting and so what we needed. We had quite a long day, I think, on that day of intense shows, and then Yana just completely lifted our spirits.
I mean, she does kind of like, I think she's coming at it from the angle of like talking about mental health, but in a kind of very like empowering way. Like she's kind of taking elements of her experience and being like, look, I'm overcoming it all. She's just like a massive classic diva. And her voice, oh my God, that diva voice was incredible. Just like in this really high ceiling room at Assembly Checkpoint. And she just fills that space, like such a presence. I was in awe.
Yeah, same.
Of her.
Oh, go see her. She's amazing. Follow her on social media, because she must take the show elsewhere. I don't know for sure.
Also, her Instagram is worth following just for the pics, because she's got such a great visual.
Yeah. Yana Alana. Who else have we seen? We've also seen some comedy.
We have seen some comedy. We've seen some great stand-ups this Fringe. So on Pippa's birthday, we went to see Sarah Keyworth at Pleasance Courtyard, 5:30, and her show is called Dark Horse. It was, as the name suggests, it kind of did something a bit unexpected, which I haven't seen from a stand-up show before, which was she was talking about the kids that she looks after and works as a nanny, and about how she's been working for them for years and watched them grow up, and about there's a boy and a girl, and it was kind of about how they've grown in different ways and been gendered and been told that they can and can't do different things based on their societal expectations of their gender.
Yeah, and she also like brings in her kind of own personal journey of how she felt growing up and having those same kind of expectations on her as well, and about being a gay lady and about coming out and the kind of like different experiences that she had to do with gender, and you know yeah, it was great.
There
Loved
was
it.
one joke about straight women that was proved challenging on the day we went to see it on Pippa's birthday, because it was so full of our friends that I don't think there were any straight women in the audience for her to bounce off of.
Yeah, she'd be like, any straight women? And it was just like, no.
It was tumbleweed.
Yeah, which is great. Highly recommend Sarah Keyworth. Also on the Pleasance Courtyard, we saw Evelyn Mock. We saw her show last year, which is Hymen Maneuver, and she's got a new show this year called Bubble Butt, and it was hilarious. I just love watching her. She's amazing.
It kind of follows on from her previous show, which is about her experiences of sexuality and being sexualized as well, and kind of like a bit of conflict between her wanting to be sexual, but then unwanted sexual attention as well. And
That's a really good way of describing it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anymore.
It was just really funny.
Yeah, and all the layers that she has of being like from an immigrant family, being Swedish, being Chinese, all these kinds of layers that she has on top of her, and how that means that she interacts with her own sexuality and relationships and things like that.
She's just got such a distinctive wit. She's got a really distinctive way of delivering her jokes that it's kind of impossible to describe, so you have to go and see her and just know that she's brilliant.
Yeah. And she likes talking about like the slightly... Well, how does she describe it?
She likes making white men feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. She likes talking about the difficult issues and making it awkward and funny. She loves tension. So yeah, really recommend Evelyn Mock. She's amazing. I think that's all we should recommend for this episode.
I think we should
we've
draw
got
a
honestly,
line.
we've got so much. If you check out our Twitter, the blog, the website, any of our social media, Instagram, any of that, we are constantly updating with stuff that we see. So, and we know that we've got so much more to see. If you've been someone that's contacted us, we're really sorry. It's just a matter of the amount of emails that we have at the moment. So we're trying to see as much as we can, but it's not that we are purposefully ignoring you.
One thing actually is that we should say is that Plunge Theatre's show, who you may remember Tukku was on our podcast a little while ago, and she's part of a theatre company called Plunge, and they do a comedy cabaret show called Cling Film, which is really, really funny if you're looking for like an 11 o'clock late night show to go with a bunch of mates and just have a hilarious intersectional feminist time. Their show Cling Film is on at Pleasance Courtyard at 11 p.m, and they've actually given us a discount code. So if you go book through the Pleasance website and enter the code Bechdel25, then you get 25% off. Yeah!
What more could you want? Go
Enjoy.
book. So we shall take the plunge now. That's me trying to segue out.
We need to go and see another show.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we gotta go, guys.
Bye.
Have a good week. Have a good Fringe. Bye. Say bye.
Bye.